Morning guys, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. I got a real treat for you here today. Here we have my good friend's 1996 Geo Prizm. It's got the 1.6 liter 4-banger. Now this is a rebadged Toyota Corolla, so all the drivetrain components are made in Japan quality. That's why it's still on the road. It's got the 4AFE Toyota dual overhead cam power plant and a 5-speed manual transmission. Oh, look at this beauty. It's got everything you need, nothing you don't. Even got power door locks. It'll still work. Crank windows. Let's see here. 238,000 miles on it. So this is one of my all-time favorites. I guess you know, it's definitely been through hell and back. Several front-end collisions. He's got the front bumper painted like an upside-down Russian flag, I guess. But man, this thing, we've taken it camping trips, off-roading. It's been there and back, and still going strong. But it's here for some engine work. So let's pull it into the shop, and I'll give you a brief rundown of the history on this thing. And well, we'll do some, I guess, repairs and diagnostics, and should be a good time. Well, you see what I mean by I need some engine work? Yeah, that's pretty cool. Alright, let's I'll show you some notes and we'll get to it. Alright, here's a brief rundown of the history. So, a little more than a year ago, at 219,000 miles, he got a check engine light, and the engine was shaking, and it was cylinder misfires in number 2 and 3. So we did a compression check. Cylinders 2 and 3 were both at 90 psi cranking compression, and the other ones, 1 and 4, were at 180. So at that point, I suspected a blown head gasket between 2 and 3, since, you know, what are the chances of both of them failing at the same time and blowing, you know, and having the same compression number. So we removed the head. I didn't see anything wrong with the head gasket. There weren't any cracks. And I did a leak down check, and interestingly enough, it was leaking out the exhaust valves on both cylinders number 2 and 3, and the other ones were fine. I'm like, wow, that's kind of weird. And there's a lot of deposits, you know, carbon deposits on there. Now, these the Achilles heel for these Toyota 4-bangers is oil burning, oil consumption. Now, you know, at 200,000 miles, it was burning about a quart every 1,000 miles, which, you know, isn't too bad. It's but it was enough to actually make deposits on the exhaust valves and cause low compression on cylinders 2 and 3. So when I found that out, well, we just did a quick and dirty, take out the valves on 2 and 3, just the exhaust valves, lap them in, clean them off, put new seals on those. Now, I only did cylinders 2 and 3 since he just wanted to get back on the road, quick and dirty. That restored his compression, but the oil consumption, believe it or not, actually got a lot worse. Now I was using a quart every 400 miles. That really blew my mind. How can, restoring compression on 2 cylinders make it burn oil more? And we did put new seals on just the exhaust valves, the ones that I cleaned up. So fast forward to earlier this summer. This was in July at 229,000 miles. It was, it was still burning a quart every 400 miles. So I'm like, that's ridiculous. Let's first try the cheap fix. Replace all the valve seals. Okay, so it already had new valve seals on exhaust valves 2 and 3. It's a 16 valve engine. So I'm like, I'm going to do the rest of them. Just do them all and see what happens. And for this operation, I actually left the head on the engine. Just remove the valve cover, the camshafts, and just do the valve seals on there. The oil consumption did get a little better. Well, it actually returned back to about a quart every 1,000 miles. So I'm like, okay, that's a good improvement. However, a new problem surfaced. Now he had an intermittent misfire on cylinder number 1, again due to low compression. And this time it wasn't cutting out completely. It was dropping to about 130 psi, and having a misfire, just like that cobalt we had with the leaking exhaust valve. So exact same scenario. So I'm like, I should have cleaned all the valves when we had the head off last time, but oh man, I guess. But in this case, since our oil consumption didn't improve dramatically, and we still have dirty valves on cylinders 1 and 4, and what is the underlying problem for the oil burning? The valve seals didn't fix it. Well, it helped a little bit, but it's still burning a lot of oil. The thing on these engines is the oil control rings actually lose their ability to scrape the oil off the cylinder walls for some reason, either from heat, from age. The maintenance on this thing is actually very decent. He's changed the oil every 3,000 to 5,000 miles, and obviously he doesn't use synthetic since it throws it all out the tailpipe. But the engine is in great shape. And when I took it out last time, took it apart, took the head off, the honing was still there on the cylinder walls. The head looked fantastic. There's no excessive wear in anything. Just the oil control rings, for some reason, like to kind of stop doing their function. So the game plan for today is we're going to rip this thing apart, take the head off, take the oil pan off, take the pistons out, and replace the piston rings. Now, I'm still debating. We'll take a look at what the piston rings look like, the compression rings, the oil control rings. So at least we're replacing the oil control rings, probably the all the rings, and then we'll obviously service the valves on the head. We'll lap the exhaust valves in number 1 and 4. Maybe take number 2 and 3 out again, since it has been burning a lot of oil, and just start do a complete valve job on the exhaust valves. And then he also recently got a P0401 EGR flow insufficient. And the problem here is this pressure transducer. If you pop it out, there's a tube on the bottom that actually connects it to the exhaust port on the EGR, coming right off of the EGR valve to control the flow on this thing. See that little pipe down there? That is completely clogged with carbon, sludge, whatever. It's really thin pipe. So we'll clean that out to restore that function. So that's the game plan for today. Engine teardown, new piston rings. I got a whole set of parts up here. Let's see what we got in the box. I was actually able to obtain a set of, look at this, made in Japan, genuine GM part number. So for this Geo Prizm, it's a GM part number, but obviously these rings are Toyota rings, you would think. So I got a full set of piston rings here, head gasket right here, oil pan gasket, new iridium spark plugs. I mean, this thing's gonna fly until it hits the next curb. He's bent more than a couple wheel rims, so let's get to it. Good thing to have your sweet Haynes repair manual here on the workbench. Look at this thing, it's kind of vintage looking, a little yellowed. But what we'll need from here is obviously torque specs when we put the head back together. And we put these piston rings on. It actually has a great section on engine overhaul procedures. Basically, what I'm interested in is putting these piston rings back on. There's a specific staggering sequence. It gives you all the clearances, you know, how much clearance there should be in the gap on that piston ring. So a lot of good stuff in here. So we'll use this as we go along. Let's start by jacking the car up, draining some fluids, getting the air tools out, and going to town. This is how much oil I drained out of the oil pan just now. I'd say maybe a couple quarts. The oil capacity to begin with is pretty small. It's about 3.5 quarts. And if it's burning a quart, you know, every 1,000 miles, probably more than that, you have to be real careful to add oil on time if you don't want to grenade the engine here. So props to my friend for keeping up on the oil maintenance. If he was negligent, then this car would be in a junkyard a long time ago. But hopefully we can fix this today. Well, before we get too far here, I want to do a manual compression check just to verify our problem, just so you guys can see what's going on. So I have all the spark plugs out, ignition disabled, fuel injectors disabled. This is cylinder number 1, wide open throttle crank. Oh, we got 170 there. That's probably because that cylinder's all flooded out, and so that's not too bad. At hot idle, I remember it was at 130 when it was misfiring. And the guy actually, I told him to unplug the fuel injectors yesterday when he was driving it to the shop. It was misfiring so bad that I didn't want him to cook his catalytic converter and, you know, add more fuel to the fire here. So he drove it on 3 cylinders. Alright, here's cylinder number 2. Stick this guy here. See that? There's 190. So write these down. There's 160, 190. Let's do the other 2. Here's cylinder number 3. Oh, only 150. That's interesting. Guess we'll end up lapping all these valves. And cylinder number 4. 210. Holy cow. Huge difference. 210. Let me try number 3 again. I'm not happy with that one. About 160. Huh. Alright. You got 160, 190, 160, and 210. So when we lap these valves, we can pour a little gasoline in the combustion chambers with the head upside down. Just make sure we're not overlooking anything. Alright, before we get too carried away here, I got the exhaust manifold off, and I want to do a leak down test just to confirm which cylinders are leaking out of the exhaust valves, to confirm our compression readings. Now we know number 1 is going to be the worst. It should be. So I'm going to turn up the pressure here. So cylinder 1 is at TDC compression stroke. And sure enough, coming out of the exhaust port. So that's confirmed. Exhaust valves leaking on number 1. Now let's do the other ones. Now for some reason number 3 showed lower compression. So I don't know why. I did clean those valves not too long ago, if you remember, about a year ago. But we'll do all of them for consistency. Alright, here's number 2. Oh yeah, we gotta sorry. Let's go in firing order. So it's 1, 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3, 4. So rotate the crankshaft 180 degrees. Like so. So 3 would be our next cylinder in the firing order. Let's do number 3. Okay. Pressurize that one. Huh. Number 3. Sure enough. Leaking out of the exhaust valves. Okay. Next is number 4. Here's number 4. Huh. Surprisingly, there's quite a bit of leakage in number 4, even though we had the best compression reading on that one. Alright, on to number 2. Alright, here's number 2. What am I doing here? Number 2. That would have been a little too much leakage there. So this is minimal leakage in this one. Still a little bit. So we're going to end up cleaning all the exhaust valves. So the game plan for the teardown here, I've already done this once before and developed a pretty good strategy. So very easy to work on, a lot of room. What we're going to do is pop the distributor off, pop this coolant distribution, housing off, so we don't have to disconnect any hoses, just 3 bolts. Throttle body, also 4 bolts, swing it out of the way, you don't have to disconnect any cables or wires. And then obviously fuel rail and wiring harness down here, and we'll take this whole assembly, intake manifold and head, off together. Now, obviously, before we pull the head, we're going to take the camshafts out, and I'll show you the special procedure to do that. Just a quick progress report. We're almost ready to unbolt the head. We've got our coolant distribution assembly off, throttle body's off, vacuum lines are all unplugged, electrical harness is going to stay down there. So all we need to do is unplug the fuel return line here and the banjo bolt right there. Underneath, I got the cross member disconnected here, so we have access to the oil pan, since that's how we're going to unbolt the connecting rods from down here. And there's a plate, you know, like a reinforcement plate that attached the transmission to the engine, so got that off. We have full access to our oil pan, and finally we are ready to detension the timing belt and take these camshafts out, and the head bolts are hiding under the camshafts, so that's no big deal here. And cylinder 1 right now is at top dead center, and the way we line up these cams, the big sprocket actually has little notches right there that are level with the head. There's the second one right there. And then looking at the actual cam gears, let's see, get a little light down here. There are 2 dots that are facing each other right down in there. Maybe get a little better lighting. You can see them right there. And then that's all you need to line these babies up. Now, if you notice, the gear on the intake camshaft here is like a split gear, and by trial and error I actually found out that that's pretty important to cut down on the noise here, because these gears are obviously going to have some lash, and if that split gear is not spring tensioned against the exhaust camshaft gear, the valve train is going to be really noisy. And there's a trick that I learned from the Haynes manual. See, there's a hole right there. It's called a service hole. Once we unbolt these camshaft caps, we'll actually be able to put a 10mm head bolt right through there and lock these gears together so they don't spring, spring apart when we decouple it from the exhaust camshaft. So once I unbolt the head, we'll get to cleaning the valves and getting those pistons out of there. Alright, to detension the timing belt, there's a little access cover, rubber plug. Take our 10mm socket, put it right in the hole, break that nut loose. You can see the tensioner down there. It's moving. So I'm going to pull the belt out and lock the tensioner in place. And that'll then we'll just slip it off the sprocket. We don't need to take the engine mount off or anything. Pop this other camshaft out. Getting there.